Hi, today we are putting Tailwind CSS and Vanilla CSS head to head to see which one is faster, more readable, and easier to manage. No, yeah, this is the official new logo of CSS. If you didn't know, CSS got some new exciting features and a new logo in 2024. So we are rocking with that, but back to the video. I will style the same UI element using both methods, and I will also start the timer, and we'll see which one takes the win.
Let the fight begin!
Now let's dive in. Okay, I have to be honest, I didn't have the motivation to design a UI element. So I went to Dribble, typed in UI element, and I couldn't believe the first element was perfect that came out. So we are going to build that today. To make things a bit easier, I replicated the design in Figma. This way I can easily access the sizes, paddings, and gaps to keep everything precise. Yeah, we have to give credit to D-Studio. They are making flawless UI, so check them out on Dribble. I also pre-wrote the HTML skeleton. No classes yet, just the structure. Since HTML isn't directly related to the CSS comparison, I think that's fair. Alright, now that everything is set up, let's start styling. Timer on. I decided to kick things off with Vanilla CSS, after all, it's the OG. So I created a style.css file, linked it to the HTML, and you guessed it, started coming up with some class names. And then more class names, and even more. Here class name, there class name. What was that? Another class name? Oh look, another one. Yeah, Vanilla CSS, you end up defining a lot of class names. I mean, you don't have to, but if you want to keep things organized, it's kinda inevitable. I pulled up the Figma file, and I started to style the elements. I started with the cart container class, which is the outermost div of the element. Next, I defined some basic boilerplate CSS, you know, the essentials like box sizing, border box, padding, margin, and the font family. To speed things up, I used Font Awesome to grab the icons needed for the design. This saves a lot of time. And Font Awesome has a massive library of ready-to-use icons. By the way, this video is not sponsored by Font Awesome, but side note, I'd love to be sponsored by them. So Font Awesome, if you're watching, call me. Unfortunately, the screen recording decided to shut down for some reason, so I will walk you through a sped up video. First, I defined some styles for the outermost container element. Then I started to work on the inside elements. Define some font sizing, font weights. I used a lot of flexbox. I don't know why, I'm just used to it. I also defined the positions of the elements. Then I have to figure out the distance between the elements with margin bottom. For the profile pictures, I used Unsplash. And lastly, I positioned this vertical line. And 178 CSS lines later, it was done. Here we can compare the Figma file to the actual element. And if I'm being honest, it came out to be pretty cool actually. And drumroll, it took me 35 minutes and 11 seconds. So we already know the time for CSS, and Tailwind is still a mystery. Now that we have seen how Vanilla CSS performed, let's switch gears and see how Tailwind CSS handles the same challenge. Now let's take a moment to talk about Tailwind CSS, just in case if you have been living under a rock for the past few years. Tailwind CSS is a utility-first CSS library that has truly won the hearts of millions of front-end developers worldwide. Tailwind operates with predefined utility classes, which might be a bit challenging to grasp at first. However, Tailwind has an excellent documentation, making it easy for developers to learn and apply as they go. Okay, so let's get to it. Let's see how Tailwind does on the test. I started the timer here as well, and I started working. First, I started with the CDN, which caused some problems later, but more on that later on. So I pretty much did the same thing, started from the outside, worked my way into the inside. First I gave a border to the container element, then positioned it on the page. Then I realized that the Tailwind IntelliSense plugin wasn't working, and it weirdly gave me the Bootstrap recommendations, so I had to fix it. So I stopped the timer for this. I had to experiment with the plugins and the plugin settings. Then I realized that the problem was with the CDN, so I had to make a tailwind config.js file and use the Tailwind CLI. After that, the Tailwind IntelliSense started working flawlessly. I also used a lot of flexbox here, but at least I didn't have to jump between CSS and HTML files, so it was kind of refreshing. I don't really want to bore you with the details. I kind of had to do the same thing as with Vanilla CSS. I colored in the tags, styled some text with font sizing and font weights. Next, I moved on to styling the big buttons at the bottom. Then moved on to positioning the elements according to the Figma file. Then I had to place this tricky vertical line again. All I had left was to add the icons and the pictures. First I used the Awesome CDN and it actually worked. Next I looked up all the icons we needed and pasted them into the project. And a few icons later we had everything in place ready to go. The final step was adding the profile images. I downloaded them from Unsplash as well. For this one, I used the style attribute directly in the HTML. Now I'm sure there's a better way to handle this, but I went with this solution and I found this researching it online, so yeah. And with that, we had everything in place. So I had to quickly stop the timer and it took 30 minutes and 31 seconds. Okay, so what are my conclusions with this experiment? Vanilla CSS took 35 minutes, while Tailwind took 30 minutes. That's a 5-minute gap. Now, maybe I could have been better or faster if I knew Tailwind better, but I've already used Tailwind in countless React projects, so I'm fairly comfortable with the base of it. Still, I don't think a 5-minute gap is that significant, and I wouldn't say that's enough on its own to justify switching entirely to Tailwind, but in my opinion, Tailwind felt smoother and faster to work with overall. Now let's break it down and look at the pros and cons. CSS is fully customizable, which means you have complete freedom to style things exactly as you like, no restrictions. Clear HTML and CSS separation. This is a big one. Separation of concerns. Your structure and your styling are in different files, which is an important principle in programming. No dependencies or setup needed. It's just you, the browser, and CSS. No frameworks, compilers, or extra steps to get started. Universal standard. CSS is universally recognized and every front-end developer has to know it. Even if you are using Tailwind, you still need to understand CSS fundamentals. But CSS isn't perfect. Let's talk about the cons. When your project grows, it's easy for your CSS to become a spaghetti mess of overlapping class names and confusing conventions. Slower development. You are constantly jumping back and forth between your HTML and CSS files, which takes time. Styling consistency requires extra effort. If you are working on multiple projects or with a large team, it can be tough to maintain consistent styling. Now let's move on to Tailwind CSS. Faster development. With utility-first classes, you type less and get results faster. Tailwind is built for speed. No file switching. Since all your styles are in your HTML, there is no need to jump between files, which saves time. Great documentation. Tailwind has some of the best docs. You can easily learn as you go. But Tailwind isn't flawless, so let's talk about the cons. HTML gets cluttered. The downside of utility-first classes is that your HTML can get hard to read, especially on larger projects. Less recognizable as CSS. Not everyone knows or uses Tailwind, so if you are working together with others who aren't familiar, it can be a barrier. It requires extra learning. Even though it's easier to use, you still have to take the time to learn Tailwind's system. So those are my thoughts. Both methods have their strengths and the best choice depends on your project and your team. If you're working solo or on a smaller project, Tailwind can save time and keep things consistent. For larger or unique designs, you can choose Vanilla CSS. Let me know in the comments below, are you team Vanilla CSS or are you all in for Tailwind CSS? Also, what did you think about this experiment? Don't forget to like and subscribe and share your thoughts below. I see you guys in the next one. Peace!